Hola, ¿qué tal? Bienvenido a este canal. Yo soy Janfres, artista conceptual, ilustrador, director de arte. He trabajado principalmente en películas de animación y he creado este canal para compartir todo lo que sé y he aprendido sobre estos temas. También llevo ya bastante tiempo siendo docente y una de las cosas que más frecuentemente me preguntan mis alumnos y alumnas es cómo conseguir trabajo. ¿Tú también quieres trabajo? Obvio, todos queremos trabajo y encontrar nuestra primera chamba es de lo más difícil cuando salimos de la escuela. Por esta razón he invitado a la persona más adecuada para contestar todas nuestras preguntas. Esta persona se llama Ariel Goldberg, trabaja en uno de los estudios más novedosos, innovadores e interesantes del panorama de la industria ahorita de la animación, Skydance. Tal vez habrán leído que alguien medio famoso en la industria entró y es ahorita una de las cabezas de este estudio, John Lasseter. Sí, el fundador de Pixar es una de las cabezas de este estudio y Ariel está ahí como director del reclutamiento. Entonces imaginen la posición en la que está y la legitimidad de sus palabras cuando nos explica cómo conseguir nuestro primer trabajo. Eso es lo que les espera en esta entrevista. Nos explica un paso a paso de lo que tenemos que hacer desde que salimos de la escuela hasta que estamos adentro del estudio para crecer. Pero antes de dejarles con la inmensa sabiduría de Ariel, te invito a que participes a mi programa donde te voy a enseñar los 12, ¿es difícil eso? Los 12 temas fundamentales que cada artista profesional tiene que saber para poder pretender entrar en la industria. Puedes entrar en cualquier momento, ahorita estamos visitando el tema del color, un tema súper interesante, pero si a fuerzas quieres iniciar desde el inicio y vivir toda la experiencia completa, estoy por abrir un nuevo grupo en septiembre. Así que si te interesa, si quieres sumarte y que te avise en cuanto se abra, por favor mándame un mail en esta dirección y recibirás en su momento una invitación para entrar en este grupo. Ya más de 150 personas están interesadas, el grupo está creciendo, aparta tu lugar de una vez, va a ser una experiencia increíble. El primer grupo que se abrió en enero está creciendo brutalmente. Hemos llegado a 300, 250, 300 personas, alumnos, alumnas, dedicadísimos con una mentalidad y una ambición brutal y la estamos pasando de lujo mientras aprendemos un montón. Pero ahora sí, ya basta de infomerciales, promociones y discursos que no acaban. Te dejo con Ariel Goldberg y estoy seguro que le vas a pasar de poca madre y aprender un montón.
What would you recommend to an artist who has just left school and who's looking for his or her very first experience in the industry regarding portfolio creation, or what would be the steps these kind of artists should do to get the first step into the industry?
I would say, first of all, even before discussing portfolios, just really quickly to say that from my experience, both as an artist and as a recruiter, this is for most people, the most challenging and frustrating period. And if people are feeling, oh, this is taking a long time, I keep applying and not hearing back, or I keep interviewing and not getting the job, just to know that this is normal. This is usually how it goes for 90% of the people who eventually do end up working and eventually have great careers all say the same thing, that 90% of the time, for most of them, it was hard right out of school. So first of all, that's just as a message of hope, right? that most people who are working successfully have gone through this struggle, and it took a while. As far specifically to your question with regard to portfolios, very few people, even the best artists that I've seen, have portfolios that are really ready to go right out of school. There's a lot that you learn in a studio, but you can do work on your own to catch up. And a very easy trick is to see a comparison. You know, sometimes the biggest question is, I don't even know what it's supposed to look like, right? I ask 50 different people and I get 50 different opinions, and that can be very confusing. So my advice, just a very simple thing that people can do is, especially those of us in animation and in the film industry in general, think about a movie or a television show that came out within the last year, 2 years, 3 years, but maybe no more than that, that you think, oh my gosh, I would have loved to have been a storyboard artist or a visual development artist, character designer, CG modeler, etc. on that movie. Like that movie was something I would have loved to have worked on. And then go to, I'm sure that most people watching this know the site imdb.com, internetmoviedatabase.com. And I would recommend that they go on that site and look up that movie, that production, and then see who was credited for doing the job that they want to be doing. So say it's character designer. Who were the character designers on this movie that you wish you could have worked on? And then Google those people's portfolios. You know, some of them, if they're older and they've been working for decades, they might not have portfolios online. Maybe they're just getting jobs by reputation at this point in their careers. But the younger ones, the ones in their 20s, 30s, 40s, will for sure have websites. And then you can see, how are they presenting their work? First of all, what kind of work are they presenting? And then how are they presenting it? There's a certain element of polish and professionalism with which they are presenting their work. And this seems to be working for them, right? They're clearly getting jobs. So to be very clear, I'm obviously not recommending that anybody copy anyone else's work, but there's a lot to learn from just the presentation and also the content. So you'll see, oh, you know, my work is really good and it's technically it's on the right level, but I only have, you know, young athletic characters in my character portfolio design because that's what I like to draw. But the people that are getting work have a lot of different types of characters. They have old characters, heavier characters, thinner characters, characters that aren't human, animals, animals that look like animals and animals that look more human-like, you know, aliens, fish. So usually there's a big range in someone's portfolio. But you'll also find that just because two character designers worked on one movie, it doesn't mean necessarily that they have the same portfolio. So that will also give you a little bit of hope because you'll see, oh, I don't have to be one specific way. It's more about the technical level that you have to achieve and the way in which you have to present your work. So that's a recommendation that I can give everybody. Just go on, you know, in animation and film, that website is imdb.com. I don't know what that might be in games or visual effects, or, well, visual effects also crosses into films, but if you're looking to get into, say, motion graphics or graphic design and print work, I don't know where you would go to find those things, but I know that those lists probably exist somewhere, just like they exist on imdb.com for the film industry. And that's going to be a great frame of reference to evaluate where is my work compared to the people that are getting the jobs. And that also requires someone to have enough objectivity when he or she is looking at his own work.
You feel that many times people are too subjective about their work and they're too cautious and precious about their work, and they lack a bit of, okay, let's see what I have compared to what the others have. You feel this could be something that, how do you say it, holding off a lot of artists in their career?
Not a lot, but enough. There are artists, you know, that I've given portfolio reviews, and I look, you know, my opinion is just an opinion. And again, people who have gone to enough portfolio reviews know that I might give one opinion and the other recruiter might give a totally different opinion, right? So, but when I do sit there and I am giving advice on a portfolio, if something isn't working for me, the same solution as what somebody else might suggest, but the general note that an artist needs to hear is that something about this isn't working for me as an artist professional. There's something that's not working for me. Now, I might not have the final decision, you know, the final answer for how to fix it, but the thing to understand is that something isn't working. And too often I find that a lot of artists are really great. They take the feedback, they want to hear what's not working. It's never pleasant to hear, but they understand that this is for the benefit of developing their work. And then there are some artists who always get very defensive, and they can always have an answer for you for why they decided to do this thing that you that you critiqued, but they always have a good reason. And that's fine, but those good reasons aren't helping you to advance your portfolio. Sometimes it's good to just listen. You might have your good reasons for doing something, but you still have to understand that you had a good reason for it, and yet if it worked for me, I wouldn't have remarked on it, right? So I'm not just sitting there trying to pick things apart so I can sound smart, right? I'm not that kind of person. So it's there are people like that, and that's unfortunate. They just like to sound smart. They'll tear your work apart just because that's their nature.
Yeah.
But you can figure out who those people are pretty quickly. But when you see someone who really is trying to give you a critique because he wants your portfolio to be better, then just don't get defensive about that. Some artists do. A lot of artists don't. But I think it's important to say that because enough artists do, and they won't move forward until they can get over that.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a great piece of advice, and that's why what I felt when you mentioned it, and that's why I wanted to dig a bit deeper in this. You mentioned a word that to me I think is really important. You said it works for me, and this to me is really important because it puts your appreciation on an objective level. It works or it doesn't work. It's like engineering somehow. And I feel it really helps being less, considering art less from a sensitive point of view, because in the industry, it's really about if it works or not. It's not about being pretty or not. So I would just like to have your opinion on that, if it's not repeating something you've already said, because I think this is really something important that maybe someone going out of school doesn't really appreciate, but that is really important in a recruiter perspective.
So a recruiter who is doing his or her job properly, and not every recruiter does, but the recruiters that I know in the major animation studios in Los Angeles, for the most part, are all very capable. And what we do is, it's easy to think that we just have an opinion and that we don't like someone's artwork, but that's not really what we're doing. It's not about my taste. Okay. Right now I'm working at a studio where we're making 3D animated films. There's a particular style, or at least a range of style. There's a certain look for most of our productions within a range. But before this, I was at Nickelodeon, and we made so many different shows, each one a completely different style. Now, as somebody who has an opinion, has thoughts of his own, there are certain styles towards which I gravitate and certain styles that aren't necessarily what I like. But that can't be the measure that I am applying when I'm reviewing a portfolio. My job is not to review a portfolio and decide, is this pretty, in my opinion. My job is to review a portfolio and decide, is this what my art directors need for their projects, right? So I really do have to be objective. I can't say that I am, I don't know how controversial you like these conversations to get. I can't say that I'm the biggest fan of say a lot of anime. Okay, some anime is gorgeous. A lot of it just isn't my particular taste. But I've hired for shows that were very anime styled, and I know what I need to look for. It has nothing to do with my taste. So yes, when we give advice, when we give feedback on portfolios, it is important to remember that one of the reasons why, as you go from recruiter to recruiter or from art director to art director, you're hearing, oh, change this to be more this way. And then the next one says, no, keep it this the same, but change that. It's because we're not really looking at your work just as a piece of art. All of us are looking from the standpoint of filling a position that we need to fill at our studio. That's why we give different opinions and different critiques, because when I was at Nickelodeon, I would give someone very different advice than I am now working at a studio that's making, these very classic looking CG animated features. And the reason is because I am looking for the needs of my studio. Now, I don't know if every recruiter is as clear about that as I try to be. I try to say, when I meet with an artist, the critique that I'm giving you is informed by my perspective as a Skydance recruiter, or prior to a year ago as a Nickelodeon recruiter or a Disney recruiter, etc. So always, every artist should take that into account, that I'm always thinking about the positions I need to fill when I'm giving advice.
Sure. And your comments are partly oriented toward that research. You need a certain artist with a certain style, personality, and everything. But at the same time, part of your comments are based on a certain technical aspect and capabilities also.
Yes, there are certain empirical skills that artists should have. I mean, before I was a recruiter, I was an artist, and I trained as an artist from the age of 8, had very technical training. And there are certain things that I think, if you have a respect for the work that you are doing, you have to learn the basics, and you have to work your way up. The basics, just like when you learn piano or any musical instrument, or when you start learning a sport, the basics are not going to be interesting, but you have to learn them. You have to build them into your wrist, into your muscle memory, so that you can go to the more complicated thing. And then the more complicated thing, I mean, you know this, Jean, as much as anybody, as a trained artist. And so, yeah, when I see portfolios and I see, I'm meeting with an artist and I see that this person is really just starting, and the portfolio has no technical skills that have been really developed, then everything else goes out the window. Yeah, then I'm not giving advice based on my needs, because I'm not going to hire this person at this time. I need this person to reach a certain level. I will never tell a person that he or she can't reach that level. That's, first of all, sometimes you think like, oh, this poor person, really doesn't seem to be demonstrating a lot of skill. But in my mind, I always think not enough skill yet. It's not for me to discourage this person and say, you know what, give up, better go back home, do something else. No, I don't know. I don't know what the future is. And sometimes the people who really are the most successful are not the ones who had the most amount of talent. Sometimes the people who have the most amount of talent get very complacent and stop working on themselves, and then plateau at a certain level. Whereas the ones who didn't have it easy, the ones who didn't have that initial talent, they work harder and harder and harder than anybody to catch up and then to exceed. And sometimes those are the most successful people. So I never know for a fact that this person will never make it. And so I will never say that to somebody. But if the person is very far behind, I'll say that. I'll say, look, you need to master these skills before you can start getting very cartoony and doing a lot of caricature. You have to learn how to draw a head, or a hand, or a box, wherever you are. You need to develop these skills first. So yes, there are certain things that have nothing to do with what I'm looking for a studio. Sometimes it's just about telling an artist, you really need to learn those.
It's really interesting because, I think people, everybody, people, but I'm an artist too, and I'm looking for jobs all the time, and it's really interesting for me to listen to this. But many times, as an artist, I guess, you go back home, you've received several portfolio reviews, and you just don't know yet what's wrong. And so I think it's interesting to layer it a bit like this, the way you're doing it right now. Part of it is technical, part of it is just the expectations for a specific job and everything. And I thank you so much for what you just said about the mindset you have all the time, believing on the future evolution of the artist, because this very channel is based actually on my suffering as an artist, because I was the one with no talent at all. I'm still not the very best, but I've struggled and I keep on struggling. And part of the audience of this channel, I think, is really interested by this way of considering art as something that is not given to you, but just the fruits of a lot of work. And listening to a recruiter, someone in your position having the same beliefs, I think it can be really impactful. It's really interesting. So,
yeah, I've been recruiting long enough now. I've been recruiting for about 8 years now. And I can tell you that I have seen artists, there are artists that I've known from 8 years ago who are at the start of their careers, who really were not very technically skilled yet at that time. And now these are some of the best artists that are working that I know. And I think what each of them had to realize was, what do I like to do? I don't need to develop a portfolio that works for Pixar and Nickelodeon. I need to figure out what I like to do and move in that and develop my skills in that direction. And to also know that when I get portfolio reviews, if I hear one note once and no one ever says that note to me again, then maybe it was just that one person's opinion. But if I hear the same note over and over again, then that means that suggests to me that there is some element of truth there. And but I think, yeah, doing that search on IMDb and really thinking about what are the projects that moved me and made me, not just moved me as an audience, but moved me as a professional. I wish I could have worked on that. That's the direction you should start to build your portfolio in, and not trying to do everything so that, well, just in case there's an opportunity in anime, I'll have some anime. And just in case there's an opportunity at Pixar, I'll have some Pixar. And if it's on, SpongeBob, I'll have some SpongeBob. Mm-hmm. It's you should have your own voice.
Amazing. This is really inspiring. I'm going to go back to the question I wanted to make a little while ago. So the formats of the portfolio, as we know it, has evolved. Before, it was just, as I was about to say, you just came with your 15, 20, 25 boards and you showed them. And lately it has evolved, and there is such a social network presence involved that it's that I have a hard time when I advise students, telling them what they should do. Because, for example, I used to send PDF portfolios, which was the next step. But right now, I'm wondering if recruiters really want to receive PDFs, or they just want a link to a social network platform or to a website. What's the best thing? My take would be that there is a certain charm to a PDF or something that involves a linear progression of the work, because you can have a bit of narrative. Mm-hmm. You can organize your pieces so that they tell something about you, which is something you can do on a website. But I would really like to have your opinion on this.
Yeah, as long as I can, the age, let's just cover one issue very quickly. The age of hard book portfolios is over. And it makes things a little bit easier on everyone. You don't have to scan and copy and print every time. You don't have to worry.
And carry.
And carry it, right? You don't have to, and I also don't have to have a stack of portfolios just growing and growing on my desk. Also, it means that if I have multiple productions that are looking for artists, I can only show one of those productions your portfolio at a time, mm-hmm. Or I have to get everyone to get, now in the age of coronavirus, it's necessary for it to be digital. It's just fundamental necessary. So let's forget about the hard books for a minute, because that's basically history. PDFs, I love PDF portfolios. I would say the only potential conflict with those is two. One is, first of all, I love them for exactly the reasons that you laid out. You can drive more of a narrative in your work, and that is important because it shows not just how you not just what kind of pieces you can produce as an artist, but also how you organize your thoughts, which is very important to know about any worker for any job, I think especially in this field. The two challenges with PDFs that are really just technical challenges are, for me, this isn't a problem. For some studios, it is. Some studios just have a limit to how much bandwidth they give everyone's email inbox. So if I'm getting a lot of PDFs coming into my inbox, there is a certain point at which maybe it will overload, and I just won't be able to open it or get that attachment to download. For me, that isn't a problem. Fortunately, at Skydance, we have pretty big bandwidth for our emails. For other studios, it might be. So it always helps to ask. And for that reason, it also helps to have a website, just in case somebody prefers a link rather than a PDF. The other reason why sometimes it helps to have a website over a PDF is sometimes I'm making lists, like Excel lists or Google Sheet lists to share with my teams of the artists that I would like them to consider. And it helps if in that column, I have the artist's name, the date that I spoke with that artist, maybe an email address, and then if I could also have a link to that artist's work, it helps. Otherwise, I have to have something that says, direct message me if you want me to send you that artist's PDF, right? So those are really the two reasons why having a website, having a PDF is great. You should have that, and you should always feel free to send it unless they tell you, oh, we don't have the space in our inboxes or something. But then you can still do it through Box or Dropbox or something like that. WeTransfer. But it helps to have a website as well. Now, your website doesn't have to be a dedicated website that you built yourself. It could be through ArtStation. It could be Instagram. It could be a blog that you have. Each of these is slightly different, and each of these offers you something a little bit different. So if you have a website similar to the PDF, should be much more curated. It's not somewhere that you put everything and anything that you've ever done. This should be a much more disciplined kind of section of your work. So you decide for yourself that this website will only have 15 pieces, or it will only have 30 pieces, whatever the number is. Typically, it's somewhere between 10 and 30 pieces, only because we recruiters won't spend forever looking at it, maybe just a few seconds actually. So you should have your website should always show your most recent work, kind of where are you right now? What is your skill set right now? What is your style right now? That's what your website should show. If you do different things, like you can design characters, but you can also paint scenes, those should probably be on two different pages on your website, because if I'm looking for a character designer, I don't need to see a lot of beautiful scenery. As beautiful as it is, I don't need to see it. I just need to see characters. And if I'm looking for a painter who's going to do these big visual development paintings, it's fine if the paintings have characters in them, but I don't need to see all of the character design process work, all the breakdowns, the turns, all of that. So those can live on two separate pages. Now, if you're doing something like ArtStation or Instagram, the benefit there is that is more, it's like a blog in that you put stuff in there and then the older stuff gets pushed down, the newer stuff stays at the top. And so just remember that if there's something that you really like, but it's older, that you need to refresh it or repost it once in a while so that it stays close to the top. But that's a really great way, because it is social. It's a really great way to build a following. And so as a recruiter, for me, sometimes there's an artist that I'm following that I really like, and then the system will recommend for me, a few other artists that are doing the same thing, or that artist is following, or they're following that same artist. And so, and you might be one of those artists, right? So it really helps. The social media side of it is also very helpful. So I honestly think, I don't know if your audience will like to hear this because this means more work, but it's good to have a few different versions of your portfolio because they're serving different purposes. The PDF, like you said at the beginning, it helps you create a narrative and show how you organize your work, how you organize your thoughts. The website allows you to do a few different things, character design, environment paintings, maybe some, I don't know if you do some CG modeling in Maya or ZBrush, but you could have them in different pages. So you can have a website that the site is more generalist, but each page is more specialized. And then you can have ArtStation or Instagram or both, or where that helps you generate followings from recruiters because of the algorithm there. So they each serve a slightly different purpose that can help you in different ways.
Okay. Are there other social networks you check for artists? Do you check Facebook? You didn't mention Facebook, but I think it's not bad.
I don't go on Facebook a lot. Now, it's not that I don't look for. I find Instagram is better because it's more pictorial. Mm-hmm. Facebook is also, especially nowadays, this is an election year in the States. It gets very political, so I just try to avoid Facebook mm-hmm. a lot. Sorry, I don't know if you're sponsored by Facebook. Facebook is wonderful.
Not at all.
But I don't use Facebook a lot, to be honest. Maybe some recruiters do, but the big ones for me are ArtStation, DeviantArt, Instagram, people's personal websites. I use LinkedIn a lot to find artists. I use LinkedIn a lot, and then from LinkedIn I go to their websites, whatever links they share, and then also applying for jobs. Then I have the artist's information in my applicant tracking system, which we call ATS, applicant tracking system, and so and then I have it there as well. But I think if someone is doing Instagram, ArtStation, and a personal portfolio site, and also has a PDF, that should be more than enough. And LinkedIn, okay. People should be on LinkedIn because it's a great professional network.
Okay, just a parenthesis about LinkedIn. Is there any is the LinkedIn behavior of the artist matters? Do you somehow consider it something positive if the artist is active on LinkedIn, posting, sharing tips and everything, or do you just check on their profile and no matter what they do there?
So I'll answer your question from a slightly different angle. Mm-hmm. I want to be clear. It never hurts an artist to me, in my opinion, if the artist is not active. If I see this artist isn't active on LinkedIn, that means he must not be serious. No, I don't think like that. If to me a portfolio's the big golden thing for me is the portfolio. Everything else is very secondary. Those things will all be important eventually, but the first thing for me is, can I find this person's portfolio? Now, does being active on LinkedIn help? Sure, it helps. Because then when someone's actively posting, always posting new work, it comes into my news feed, and I'm just always, there's one artist that I can think of specifically whose work is always coming into my feed because he is always posting and reposting and doing new things. So yeah, of course that helps him. But an artist who isn't doing that I also find on LinkedIn, I don't have any bad thoughts about that artist at all.
Okay. Yeah. The other question I had was, I hope I'm going to be able to put it clearly, but there is this stage where an artist has the art skills, but can't find a job. Have you met several of them? And can you is there like a common reason why they can't seem to get to make the leap?
Yeah. So again, this happens to artists. That struggle at the beginning of people's careers happens, and not just at the beginning of careers. This can also happen in the middle of people's careers. It can happen not just to artists whose skills aren't there yet. It also happens to artists who are very good at what they do. And it mightn't be because there is, it might be because they aren't networking enough. So if you think about, you go to school for art, right? You go to college and you're studying and you have friends in your class, and one of your friends, and you have a really good relationship with somebody, and that person gets a job, and then he recommends you because you're a good friend, and he knows that you're a hard worker, and he knows that you have great art. So he shows your portfolio to the art director. The art director says, yeah, that's great. They interview you, they bring you on board. So you got a job because of your friend. Now, think about someone who's in the next year after you, trying to connect with that friend who helped you. Your friend is more likely to help you, not someone he doesn't know, right? And so it's the same thing. It's when you're trying to network with people who have already been working for years, they already have a circle of people that they know and they trust and they like their work and they've worked together before, so they know that this person is a good, not just a good artist, but good to have on a team. And they don't know you yet, right? So they'll see, oh, great portfolio, really solid work. But if they have to make a quick decision, they might choose the person that they've already worked with before, they've already tried. You would do the same thing at a certain point in your career if someone else were coming up. Mm-hmm. So, but I don't say this to be discouraging. Actually, it should be the reverse. The way you should look at this is, okay, what this means is that I have to build that relationship with that person. And that is why this process takes such a long time, because a relationship, more than anything else, is an investment of time. And time, unfortunately, has no shortcut. As an artist, you can learn a lot of different shortcuts. You can recycle assets that you've done for other projects, put them into your work. You can start with a photograph, copy some elements. You can mock something up in 3D and then paint over it to help you with the perspective. There are lots of shortcuts in art, but time and relationships, because they depend on time investment, there's no shortcut. You really have to you have to appreciate that this person already has his or her circle of network of colleagues. If I'm going to break into that, I really have to make an effort, and I have to do it tactfully and diplomatically. And I can't just reach out to this person when I need something. I should also be reaching out just as a friend, just as a courtesy. Hey, how's it going? So that if I reach out to this person 5 times, 4 of those times I wasn't asking for anything. On the 5th time, I'll ask for something and the person will go, oh yeah, of course. This person almost never asks for anything. I'm happy to help. So that's why it can be very, very tough. So what do you actually do about it, right? So yes, you use LinkedIn, you start emailing people, you start trying to get on their radar, so to speak. You start building those relationships slowly. Some of them will go more quickly. But what do you do in the meantime? In the meantime, you still need a job. You still need to work. So I would say the animation industry is very, very small. Don't worry if your first job is not at Disney and is not at Nickelodeon. For most people, that is not the first job. That is not the first studio. A lot of people have to go through smaller studios and do smaller projects. They freelance a little bit. They start, you build your reputation slowly. With each time that you take on a job, you try to get a job with someone who can then connect you to the next step up, and it's a slow thing. But the animation industry is small, and don't worry that if you go to a smaller studio, that you're somehow mixing with the wrong group of people. I should be mixing with the Disney people. I shouldn't be mixing with these people. No, people go in and out of studios, especially in television. In feature films, the studios often hold on to people for between projects. But in TV animation, as soon as a project is over, most artists are looking for the next thing. So somebody was working at Disney Television Animation, and then for the next project, he goes to Bento Box, and then goes to 6-Point Harness, and then goes to Titmouse. So you see three companies already. They're great companies, but they're smaller. And then, on the fourth job, goes to DreamWorks TV Animation, now another big studio. And so at those smaller studios, maybe he met some artists and worked with some artists along the way that were, just starting their careers, looking to build a network. And so they worked with this artist for a while at a smaller studio. And then that artist went to DreamWorks. And at DreamWorks, his art director says, hey, do you know any good artists? And he says, you know what I do? There was this young woman that I just worked with at a smaller studio, and she's fantastic. We should bring her over. So just always working on building that network, starting maybe at a smaller studio. And if it's really a worst case scenario, if you really just are not getting artist jobs, you don't know what to do, you've done everything, you're building relationships, and you're just getting to the point of frustration where you're like, what more can I do? Then sometimes it helps to reorganize your thinking and say, okay, clearly right now, I am not getting hired as an artist. How else can I break into the industry? And so sometimes people start as production assistants, especially in TV animation where it's not so. In feature animation, if you start in production, they usually want you to stay in production. If you start as a production assistant, they want you to grow and become a producer. But in television animation, quite often it's a lot more free in that sense. So they look at production assistant as the entry-level position for people who maybe want to do production, but maybe want to do visual development, maybe want to do story, maybe want to be editors, maybe want to be in the casting department or writers. And so looking from the outside in is very, very frustrating and can be very hard to break in, especially if you've convinced yourself, I will only break in as an artist or no other way. Sometimes it requires thinking a little bit outside the box and saying, you know what? It's going to be easier for me once I am inside. The most important thing is just to get in. And the people who do that quite often meet with a lot of success because now you're a production assistant, or let's say not even the production assistant. I know somebody he really wasn't getting work. And so he started in the mail room of the studio, but he used that opportunity to get to know everybody because he would deliver everyone's mail. He was always very, very friendly, very nice. And he also took the opportunity to learn who the people were who could help him, some of those art directors, some of those producers, and to really ask them if they could mentor him. And they gave him that opportunity because everybody liked him. This is an opportunity he could not have gotten if he was still outside the studio. But because he got inside, he said, you know what, now I'm inside, it's going to be a lot easier for me to go wherever I want to go so long as I'm in. So I know a lot of people probably don't want to hear that. A lot of people probably don't want to work unless they're working as artists. But sometimes you make that detour for a year or two. A year or two will fly by before you know it, just like that. I mean, think about the start of coronavirus. It's already been 5 months, 6 months if you're in China, right? 7 months, 8 months. And the time has just flown. So all you need to do is think, okay, this is a detour from what I ultimately want to be doing, but maybe I'll learn a lot and maybe I can navigate my career much more easily from the inside. So that's what I recommend to artists that are having a hard time getting jobs as artists.
It's amazing. Really, really insightful. And it's really interesting. I hope people can see it, that you all the time are inviting people to apply strategy that uses reverse engineering. I mean, right now, you start with the problem and then you find a solution. And at the very beginning, you were mentioning, what was it? Probably.
Like the IMDb, looking at portfolios?
Exactly. Thank you. So yeah, it was just the very same logic. Just, you have a problem, you don't know the solution, and it's obvious because you haven't solved the problem yet. So let's go and see who has solved it. It may be in other fields, but there always is a parallel that can help you find solutions. Okay, so I have now 3 specific questions, and I have a bit of trouble organizing them, but I'm going to go with the very first one because it's the more concrete. You were talking about what you just mentioned. You go on IMDb, you see the show you really love, you see the crew who worked in, and then somehow you get inspired by not only the work that has been done, but mostly the way it's presented, because it's probably your entry to the studio. If it has worked for this artist, it may work for you. So it seems really logical. I go a step further many times giving this advice, but I would like to know if it's a good advice or not. Many times I say, okay, you know, if you really know what you're aiming for, let's say I'm in love with Kung Fu Panda. I've seen the portfolio of people who has worked on 1, 2, 3, Kung Fu Panda 1, 2, 3. And, but I don't know, I'm just short on inspiration to bring my own project, because sometimes it's hard. Okay, I know I want to work in that style, but I don't know which story to work with or where to start with. So what I say to people is, you know, you could also do something that to me is a really good insight as an art director or production designer, which would be, okay, take Kung Fu Panda and just imagine an extra character that doesn't exist. Bring yourself into this world. So me as an art director, as a production designer, I can see that you know how to fit, and that you know how to put a lot of yourself, your personality, sensibility in a project. Is it okay? Is it something you've seen often? Is it something that is awkward, or even worse? Is it dangerous? Because maybe you can have to deal with some, receive extra critics because you expose yourself to an existing world, so you really, really have to fit really precisely. What do you say about this strategy? Do you think
No, I think if you apply that the right way, then it's a great strategy. I think, but to your point, I wouldn't be obvious that it's Kung Fu Panda, right?
Okay.
I would say to myself, okay, here's a world that's also China, you know, medieval China, and animals, and I'm just coming up with more characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there's any number of projects that could be in China, you know, that can involve medieval Chinese architecture and the nature of, you know, Sichuan province and different animals. I just wouldn't be super obvious about it, because to your point, then if I'm say you're applying to a position at my current studio, Skydance Animation, right? So at our company, we had somebody working who was in a leadership position on one of the Kung Fu Panda movies. And that person now is looking at your portfolio, and he's seeing that you're trying to do Kung Fu Panda and you're being obvious about it. And even if your stuff is really good, there are certain very specific things whenever they talk about the style of a movie, the way that characters are designed. You know, we look at some production art, or we look at the art of books, and we think, oh, okay, I figured out what they've done here. But there's so much thought. Mm-hmm. There are years of thought and rules that are being applied to these designs. The production designers, the art directors, they're figuring out how the bark and the knots on every tree, how they're supposed to twist, how they're supposed to go. You know, the roots, do the roots of the trees go straight into the ground, or do they go out a little bit? Are they thick? Are they thin? How do the leaves fall? They figure all of this out. They break all of it down in such detailed form. They have Bibles that they make of all of the details so that the CG artists know how it's supposed to go. So, and here I am, I'm an artist and I'm a huge fan of, let's go with your example, with Kung Fu Panda. And I have, but as much as I'm a fan, and even as smart of an artist as I might be, and I can see these different nuances, there's still so much that I couldn't possibly know because I wasn't on that production for 4 years, right? So now my portfolio is going to this guy who worked on Kung Fu Panda, and he's looking at it, and he wants to love it because he recognizes that it's great art, but he can't help but see all the mistakes that I'm making because for 4 years, he had to learn these rules inside and out and really follow them. So you are setting yourself up for failure because you can't possibly meet his level of expectations, and he doesn't even want to be a jerk. It's just, it's so built into his brain right now that he can't help but see all the problems. So instead, what you should do is do something that could live in that same world, but you don't make it obvious that it's Kung Fu Panda. Maybe you even call it something different. You can know for yourself that it's basically just you're expanding upon the Kung Fu Panda world, you're creating more characters, this is a slightly different province of China or whatever, but then your portfolio comes to that same guy and he goes, oh, this is really cool stuff. And he's not comparing it to anything because this is your world now and you set all the rules. So similar, I was talking about SpongeBob SquarePants. I was giving this kind of example. Don't go under the sea. Just try to find that same style and create it. What would it be if you took the style of SpongeBob SquarePants and did it with a totally new set of characters, say in Africa, on the savannah in Africa, or in Europe, or somewhere else. So yeah, I wouldn't be obvious about it, and hopefully I've explained successfully why.
Yeah, definitely. It's dangerous if someone is biased by previous experience.
Unless you're taking Kung Fu Panda, but stylistically doing such a stylistic departure, going in such a different direction with it. This is your completely original interpretation that nobody would even think to compare it to the original. Then that's a different story.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. My other question, it occurred to me when I listened to you mentioning this kind of back and forth in the TV animation industry of the talents going back and forth between big studios, small studios, and such. This is a really US context and probably more precisely LA context. Is this kind of back and forth and movement within the industry and within someone's career possible as a foreigner freelance? Is it possible to enter the industry and make these moves? And what are the keys to be able to do this?
Yes, it absolutely is. Especially, and you know what? I think the silver lining to coronavirus is that we have gotten so much more comfortable as an industry in LA working with people from all over the world. A few months ago, I interviewed somebody who was in Vietnam, right? I mean, it really makes no difference to me where somebody is, so long as this person can do the job and is responsive, gets back, in a timely way. So yeah, I'm totally open to it. The nice thing about freelancing is you don't need a visa, you don't need any other permissions, you can just work. Sometimes a studio might be limited to how many hours per week they can give someone who is an independent contractor. So, and that's because we have, in Los Angeles, we have the union, the Animation Guild Union. And so the Animation Guild, when you are a studio that is a signatory with the guild, their interest is to have you hire as many guild members as possible. The guild members, by and large, are in Los Angeles because the jurisdiction of the guild only extends to Los Angeles County. So they, in our agreements with them, we have agreed to limit the number of contractors with whom we work, but in practice, we still work with a lot of freelancers, a lot of people who contract to us from other countries, and typically we just agree on a rate, and we and then we send them work, and we agree to about how long that work will be, and that also makes it easier later to apply for and get approved for a visa, because the more work that you do with studios all over the world, whether you're working for Mexican studios or Spanish studios or French studios or US studios or Canadian studios, the more that you can show that you have this body of work, that you are being commissioned and hired from all over the world, people are seeking out your work, it then helps you make a petition for a visa to come to whichever country, to the States, to Canada, to Europe, and to have a good reason for why they should hire you. The thing to recognize is every government, the US government, the Canadian government, the European governments, the Mexican government, every government has an element of what they call protectionism. They want to keep their citizens employed. Right now, for example, in the States, there has been a huge limit on the standard work visa, which we call the H-1B visa. This does not affect Mexican citizens because for Mexico and Canada, there's the North American trade agreements. But it's been limited because of COVID, we have such a high unemployment rate in the country right now. So right now, the interests of the government are to kind of limit the number of visas that are given out so that US citizens and residents can find employment. Fine, there's an argument to be made there, but it gets more complicated when you're talking about artists because sometimes you really just need this specific artist, and the specific artist is in a different country. So for us as a studio, to get someone a visa, the ultimate decider is the government. And we have to convince the government that it makes sense for us to, from the government's point of view, I'm not saying this is how I think or how the studio thinks, but from the government's point of view, why we have to make an argument, why are we taking a job away from a US citizen or permanent resident? And there are arguments that they take, and one of them is, look at this artist's portfolio, this artist's CV. This artist has worked for so many studios all over the world. This artist is in demand. So let's get this person. We have a special artist visa in the States that's for artists, scientists, and athletes. It's called the O1 visa. And and that's for somebody who's really demonstrated a high skill or at least high demand. And we can say, look at this artist. This artist is clearly in high demand. Or alternatively, look, this artist has already been working for us as an independent contractor for over a year. So this isn't just somebody off the street. It's somebody that we know, who knows this project and knows our culture. So yes, working as an independent contractor, as a freelancer, is very easy. We don't care where you are in the world. You could be in a country that we have friendly relationships with, like Mexico or Canada, or you can even be from a country that we have sanctions against. And you can, say right now, the US and some other countries have sanctions against Russia. I work with Russian artists, though. They're wonderful artists, and so it's for that, it makes no difference for contract work.
Great, amazing. Thank you so much for this answer that actually answered my point, and also the next question, which was about the visa problem. I really like the way you explain things and the way you cover a lot of ground in all your answers. It's really, really insightful and educational. So the very last question, it was also because of something you said, this strategy of someone entering a studio through the little door, the back door. Yeah. I really love this strategy because I think the how do you say it? The will justify the means? How do you say it?
Yeah, the end justifies the means, exactly.
The end justifies the means. And it's okay. And I think it's a really interesting example, the one from the person you mentioned who started at the mail office, because it's definitely a people's industry, and meeting people should, I think, always be a priority. So I really like this, but I was just thinking, how much have you seen people jump from how do you say it? From areas to areas within a studio. So the one from mail office to art is probably one of the biggest leaps. But do you see internally a lot of these? Because I can see that in your explanations, in overall what the recruiters recommend is that, okay, focus and narrow your spectrum, and then you're going to have more entrance in different positions. But I can see people being a bit afraid of this, feeling, okay, I don't want to be this all my life. I don't want to just be a character designer, because an artist, you know how we are, you're an artist yourself, and we want to be all over the place. So I was just wondering, have you seen a lot of people bouncing within a studio in between different positions just because opportunities appeared, or just because they were following their own evolution?
Yeah, I would say that's a really great question, because I am a strong proponent of people following what they are passionate about and doing different things throughout their careers, because otherwise, yeah, you'll get bored very quickly doing the same thing. Look, in my career, I've had the weirdest career. I started as an actor. I went back to school to become an animator. Then I became a concept artist, and then I became a recruiter. Who knows what I'll be doing next? So I would be a complete hypocrite if I said, no, you should stay in one lane and only do this. And also I'm an example of the fact that you can do it. Now, sometimes if you make a shift that's very big, you might have to understand that you will have to go back a little bit in terms of rank, when you make that shift, because you've been doing this thing and you've really excelled at this thing. But if you're going to switch over to this thing, which you haven't done the basics yet, maybe with this experience that you already have, you don't have to go all the way back to the beginning, but you won't be able to just make a move, from, say, director level to, like, right now I'm the director of talent acquisition. If I switch to a different department, that's not my intention right now, but if I switch to a different department, I don't know if I could be just at the director level. I have to, first of all, diplomatically, politically, that might be very difficult, because there are other people that have already been waiting in line in that department to be promoted, and they will hate me if I get put in over them. So yeah, sometimes you have to take a step back, but artistically, I think it's a little bit easier. And the way to do it is this. If you recall earlier, I was saying, when you have a portfolio website, if you do different things to have them on different pages, right? So don't organize, a lot of people organize their portfolio sites by project. Like, here is this one film that I was developing, this concept that I was developing. It's, I don't know, Little Red Riding Hood in space, or yeah, that's a good one. Why not? Little Red Riding Hood in outer space. And here are my character designs. Here are my environment paintings. Here are my storyboards. Here's basically everything that I've done for this project. And then over here, I have another project I was doing, my take on Homer's Odyssey. So again, all the character designs, all the ship designs, all the environments, all in one place. So as a recruiter, now you have to think about how recruiters work and how they look at your work. So as a recruiter, I'm looking for a character designer. So I go to your website and I see this Little Red Riding Hood project, and I see some great character designs, but then I see a lot of environment design, prop design, paintings, some storyboards, and I'm going, all of this is cool, but it's not a good use of my time, because right now I gave myself 1 hour in my day to really focus on finding a character designer. So if I'm only seeing a small amount of Little Red Riding Hood character designs, and I don't see any more character designs, and I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, then I'm going to quit and go on to the next website. I didn't even see that if I kept scrolling, then I would get to your Odysseus character designs, right? So that's why I would say, don't organize your website by project, organize it by discipline. So take those projects, and from that project you would take all of your character designs, and then you would take all of your character designs from the Odyssey and whatever else you're working on, and have a page that's just character designs, and then have another page that's all of the props and environments. Props are an interesting thing. When you design props, props don't necessarily need their own page. You can have the kind of props that your characters carry or use as part of the character design page, and the kind of props that are in the world, like a street light or a stop sign or whatever, those can be in the environment section of your work.
Sure.
Right? So that way, when as a recruiter, when I'm looking to hire you and I don't know you yet, you send me the link not to www.myportfolio.com, but you send me the link to myportfolio.com/character designs. You take me to the exact link that I'm looking for. And I go, okay, perfect. And I hire you as a character designer, everything's great. And then at the studio, you start saying, look, but I can also do all of this stuff. Maybe even in the interview, you say, look, I do character design, I do it really well, I love it. But if you ever need somebody to also help out with environment designs, I can also do this and this. And in the interview, that's a great time to show them that as well. And they go, wow, that's amazing. I'm going to hire you as a character designer, but I know that if I need you to do some other work, that's also an option. And then inside the studio, it's a little bit easier to make those jumps back and forth. So to answer your question, yes, I have seen artists make that jump across different disciplines successfully. It's not that hard to do, but you do need to start before people know you. You have to present yourself as a specialist, and then once people get to know you, you can show them all the skills that you have, and that's only going to impress them further. But if you start out as a generalist, they're going to think, I don't know where to put this person.
Yeah. So you don't want to be a generalist. You just want to be several specialists.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Well, I think we're done for the very first segment. I think we covered a lot of ground, and it's such a wide answer to the question, what should I do to get hired?